It's good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy, Millsy. Back at Home Town Commander Rec for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew a version 1.0 deck list of the commander in front of us and my quest out, brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing, and that's what we're back to do today. The deck list is going to be down in the description for you below, as well as I'd really appreciate it if you could interact with the videos, like, comment, subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. But breezing our way through here through a Teamer week, I thought it was fair to take a break for some Dragon Commanders and take a look at Surrak, Dragonclaw, a 5-mana Teamer Human Warrior 6/6 with Flash that can't be countered, creature spells we control can't be countered, and other creatures get trample. Surrak was probably one of our best Teamer Stompy options, I think, until the new Eshki came out. The new Eshki, Commander Eshki, is a really great option for these Teamer Stompy shells, and so I think she's going to get a lot of love for that. But Surrak does add a lot of value on one card, stopping your creature spells from being countered, giving them all trample. Those are two key things to help get your creatures in, get them deployed, get them running, right? So our goal is just going to be ramp up to big creatures, get them in, get them going, and don't look back, right, as we just hopefully bowl over our opponents in combat. But I want to say a quick thank you to the channel members. Thank you so much for all your support. If you're interested in seeing the videos just a few days early, check out that link below the video. But as far as getting up and ramping goes, there's a lot of ways to look at this. We have things like Domri, Anarch of Bolas, who can get us that mana every turn and prevent creatures from being countered, and also gives our creatures a little buff. Does have that fight on the -2. Again, nice to get the mana every turn and that little buff. Fanatic Arona is probably one of our best mana dorks, but it's been printed recently for just pure mana outlook. Single green, normally 4 green if you control a creature power 4 or greater, could just really help you get a ton of mana. Goreclaw, Terra Calcisma works very well with reducing the cost of those big creatures by 2, allowing them to hopefully get down a little bit cheaper, and then can pass out a little buff and trample whatever she attacks. Gwenna can tap for 2 mana to cast creatures or activate abilities of creatures, and then whenever you cast a creature spell with power 5 or greater, you get to untap Gwenna and put a counter on it, potentially allowing you to tap it multiple times per turn to allow you to add, obviously, just more mana that way. Nylea Keen-Eyed is going to reduce your creature's cost to cast, which is great. When you eventually have that devotion to green, she becomes a great 5/6 with Instructable. It can actually look at the top and get creatures off the top if you want to. Well, a lot of the times it just acts as a way to reduce your spells a little bit more, and then be a nice indestructible blocker or attacker, depending on what you need her for. Selvala, of course, another one of our great mana dorks. Pay green and tap her to add X mana in any combination of colors where X is the greatest power among creatures we control, so the bigger our creatures, the more the mana. And then whenever any other creature enters the battlefield, if it has the highest power, its controller draws a card. So a good way for us to potentially draw some cards as we're putting our big things in. Summerworld Sage can tap for 3 mana in 1 color just to cast creatures. Again, most of our deck is creatures, so we're going to happily take advantage of that. The new Teamer Battlecry makes a ton of sense here, reducing our spells by 1 for each creature with power 4 or greater we control, hopefully just getting our creatures down for super cheap. And as a 4/3, well worth the cost just alone for itself. And then Thrix the Sudden Storm, giving us the ability to cast spells with mana value 5 or greater for 1 less and can't be countered. So this will actually protect any of our big sorceries we'd want to cast as well, which is really nice. Surrak most times is going to protect the creatures. Thrix not only reduces them more, but actually is going to help protect our other spells as well. The truth is, this section could contain pretty much anything you want in these colors. Teamer has a great range of big stompy creatures, and what I tried to do was just kind of give a nice artisan collection here of some of my favorites, and that all can piece together on the board together. Defiler of Vigor. It's a 5-mana 6/6 that says an additional cost to cast a green permanent. We can pay 2 life instead of 1 of its green pips just to save us on some mana. But just in general, whenever you cast a green permanent spell, you put a counter on each creature you control, just buffing your whole board. When you're playing both Atali's, Atali Primal Conqueror says when it comes in, each player exiles from the top till they hit a non-land card. We can play any number of them without paying their mana costs. And Atali Primal Storm does something very similar, but it's on attack, and it's only the top card of everybody's library. But still, a potential way to get access to some great things as we exile off the top and try to steal some of our opponent's cards. Galt is a huge 12/12 with trample. It can come down for most of the time just about 2 green mana with its reduction. A huge threat. And great if we can get it in hasty, which we can. Ilhard the Raised Boar is a Gruul card from Ravnica, but I think it feels great in any Stompy list, especially when you got big creatures sitting in your hand. Whenever it attacks, you can put a creature card from your hand on the battlefield tapped and attacking, and you return it back at the beginning of the next end step. So again, you could cheat in something like Galton for free, attacking that turn and put it back. And as long as you have something half decent in your hand, Ilhard brings a lot of trouble with it. Kolgun Yudaro, it's a 6-mana 7/7 that gets its choice of 1 of 2 abilities when it comes in. Either it gets trample or haste till the turn, or it could fight something. So if we have any way to give it haste, might not be a bad idea to have it fight something, right, and then get in and attacking. But I like that option for Kolgun Yudaro to have that choice, depending on what you need in the moment. Of course, we got to play the pair of both Komas. Both work very well as huge beaters with great effects, both of them being 7-mana creatures. The original Koma from Kaldheim, beginning of each upkeep, you make a Koma Coil, and you could sack a Serpent to either tap something down and stop it from activating its abilities, or give it indestructible. Again, just accumulating those Koma Coils isn't bad either, because then you're just gumming up your board with creatures. And the new Koma Coil is just a big 8/12 with trample, ward 4, can't be countered, and whenever it hits somebody, you get 4 of those Koma Coils. So again, both of them are really great, both exactly what we want. We also have an option of something like Maelstrom Wanderer, a big 8-mana 7/5 that gives all of our creatures haste and double Cascading. Cascading from 8 is actually pretty good in this deck. It's going to hit a lot of creatures and a lot of things, allowing you to get some big bodies in the turn it comes in and take advantage of that haste. Quartzwood Crasher's here to help us with almost all of our creatures having trample, either on themselves or due to Surrak, right? Whenever one of our creatures we control deal combat damage to a player, we make a big dinosaur token where X is the damage dealt by those creatures to that player. So we can make up to 3 of them per combat, 1 for each player we're attacking. And then those creatures are going to have trample, again, making you more tokens the next turn as your creatures hit even more. Quilled Great Worm puts counters on creatures if they deal combat damage to players. This is great because it just grows our board, makes it harder to deal with. And then if somebody were to kill the Great Worm, you can remove 6 counters from among creatures you control and pay its cost to get Great Worm back from the graveyard. The nice part is the Great Worm doesn't have to attack for that ability. It just has to be out. Silverback Elder says whenever we cast a creature spell, we get to choose one of the following: destroy an artifact or enchantment, look at the top 5 and get a land from among them, or gain 4 life. I like this because you can start picking off artifacts and enchantments as you're casting our spells, doing the things we want to be doing anyway. Getting rid of your opponent's pesky mana rocks, or just taking out key value enchantments along the way if we could see Silverback early. Thunderman Dragon is a card I expect to see in a lot of Dragon decks, but also a lot of Stompy decks. You can look at the top card of your library anytime. You can cast spells with power 4 or greater from the top of your library. Again, that's most of our creatures. And then they get haste if they're cast this way. It just allows you to really open up the top of your deck to have access to more creatures. And bringing them with haste is pretty scary, turning that cast into damage. Vaultborn Tyrant is one of many of these similar type abilities we have in our deck. Whenever a creature power 4 or greater comes in, you gain 3 life and draw a card. The couple other of those abilities we have in the deck just draw us a card, but they don't gain a life. But still, now we're refilling our hand, right, with more creatures to play. And then if the Vaultborn dies, if it's not a token, you make a token copy of it, which is really nice. Getting that ability back in, making sure that we have it there, and it's a nice, decent body. And then Zopendrel, at the start of everyone's combat, we're going to double the power and toughness of each creature we control, making them huge threats. And making sure we can hit even harder with that trample we're afforded from Surrak. But alright, we got big creatures. How do we end it out? Well, we got a couple green creatures that give us a big buff when they come in. Of course, Craterhoof got that beautiful reprint and is one of the most well-known green finishers. When it comes in, all your creatures get trample and +X, where X is the number of creatures you control. Again, really just can turn a game into absolute chaos the turn it comes in, depending on how many creatures you have. Enrace Forerunners is the same cost, but instead of packing that big +X, it has Vigilance, Trample, and Haste as a 7/7 and gives everybody +2/+2 Vigilance and Trample. So again, kind of nice to kind of still get the buff, but also give you Vigilance so you can block as well. And then we're trying out that new Become the Avalanche, draw a card for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. This is kind of that Shamanic Revelation or Rishkar's Expertise style ability, but then you paste on the ability to give all your creatures +X till end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your hand. And with Surrak already handing out Trample, this means this is going to be a nice ability to draw a few cards and then really give them a big buff. Rhythm on the Wild and Temur Sending both percent ways for us to give our creatures haste as well. Temur Sending just flat gives everybody haste and adds that nice rider to draw us cards as creatures come in. Rhythm of the Wild gives us a choice when a non-token creature comes in, either giving it a counter or haste, so we can kind of choose depending on what we need. And then Garruk's Uprising is going to back up that trample for our whole board, and then let us draw cards as creatures with power 4 or greater come in. So these draw outlets are really nice, allowing us to keep refilling our hand and making sure we have lots of value coming down. But I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again, no deck's ever complete. This is my version 1.0 shot at Surrak. And I think as we go into testing, some of the big changes I make would probably depend on the budget of the deck. There are some really big dragons that have really nice costs, and they really would help us out. Things like Old Gnawbone. They're scary, they're good at what they do, but they do come with a hefty price tag. And since we try to keep ourselves to some semblance of budget here on the show, obviously I couldn't justify $50 for Gnawbone in my deck, although it's a very good creature. But I was looking at things like Deceptive Frostguide. You can come in and copy one of our key creatures, except make it a dragon with flying. I like this ability. I'm not playing a ton of copy in this version of Surrak Dragonclaw, but I could see a world where you put in more copy, especially to copy those big key creatures. And then I thought about something like Return of the Wild Speaker. Here's an instant that could buff all your creatures or draw you cards equal to the biggest creature you control. Again, this is a great dual threat idea. You also could look at something like Rishkar's Expertise, something that lets you draw cards equal to the number of creatures you control, and play something for free under a certain mana threshold from your hand. There are these other nice green spells that could really help us out along the way, still refilling our hand or getting value when we need them. But let's get into our playtest. Remember, the goal of playtest on the channel is not to find magical Christmas land. It's not to show off our best plays, but it's to start getting into game situations and just kind of understanding what do we look for and how do we set up our turns. Here we're keeping a 2-lander with Rattleclaw that should work our way pretty nicely into this Kadama's Reach, getting us up towards that 5-mana Surrak. And then we see the Unwritten, a nice cheat-in spell, and then End-Raise. So a lot of options here. We'll play the Buviak turn 1, obviously tap land, nothing we can do anyway. I think turn 2 we'll play the Mystic. Again, being able to tap for all 3 of our colors is really nice. And then I think we just Kadama's Reach here. The land we get in is going to come in tap, so it's not like we can use it to do that Growth Spiral. 1-2 green there. I think we'll probably get another green to hand just in case we don't see another green source for some of those. And now, right, we are bang on to Surrak, right, in our colors. My thought this turn, instead of just going right into Surrak, is doing something like Growth Spiral, draw us a card, put this forest down, and now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we have just enough mana for Surrak. We can either do it on our turn, or we could flash it in on an opponent's turn if we want, just to get him in. But either way, makes a ton of sense, right, and get him in so that way he could start giving us the buff next turn. Now, the really nice thing about Battle Crier that I think a lot of people are going to notice because they read it but overlook is it reduces all spells, not creature spells. So this could be a really effective ability, especially because now we have 4 mana left, and we could cast See the Unwritten this turn, digging for 2 creatures if we want to. We could get down. We have 4 mana, so we could get down Quartzwood Crasher if we want to. Set up next turn, we could take some big attacks. But I kind of like the idea of See the Unwritten, especially because this could potentially reduce something like Zopendrel next turn. Remember, Zopendrel doesn't have to attack in order for you to get that double. So let's see what we have access to. Now remember, See the Unwritten is putting these in for free. We're not casting them. So we don't want to do something like Maelstrom Wanderer because it's not going to give us the Cascade, right? But Volpor Tyrant feels good. And so does Ilhar, because Ilhar can start putting big things down next turn. These go back on the bottom, and now Volpor Tyrant draws us 2 cards. It gains us 6 life because of its ETBs. It's going to see both Ilhar and itself come in. Again, Surrak can attack now. We can attack with it this turn. Otherwise, right, we're really just setting up for this next turn. And now, we know Ilhar is going to bring 1 in for free. We have 4 creatures, so this is only costing 3 mana. And that reduction happens for every spell. It's not like it's just 1. So my thought is we could put something like Xenagos down if we want to. for cheating in from our hand with Ilharg, kind of makes more sense to maybe look at something like the Forerunners. But now we're at 5 creatures power 4 or greater, so we could actually play the Raise Boar here as well, giving everybody that vigilance and trample. And then, Zopadrel would have drawn us a card, and then Forerunners would draw us a card. And now we go into combat, take the big attack. We could put something like Coma down for free if we want to, just to get those coils. We could get the Quartzwood down, just to get those huge dinosaur tokens off the trample. This is a really nice board state. And remember, everything that's out is going to double. It won't double the creature that comes in with Ilharg, because Ilharg is an attack trigger, whereas Zopadrel start combat. But still, they're all +2/+2 because of the Forerunners, and then double, meaning we're going to be making just huge damage this turn as we get in and hit our opponents in a nice blaze of glory. But let's get into playtest number 2. Keeping a 1, 2, 3, 4 lander with O'Hare Chasm. This is a card I've always found pretty interesting in some of my other decks. Whenever it deals damage to a player, reveal that many cards on the top of your library. Put a creature or land from among them onto the battlefield. No restrictions, just put them down. There's Zopadrel, and then Thundermane Dragon to start. Look at the top. So there's a lot of good options here, and we see Whisper of the Wilds turn 1. This is a really nice mana dork that could tap for 2 green as long as we have a creature power 4 or greater. Here, I like the Thundermane. I like the idea of Team Ascendancy. There's a lot of good options, but I like the Thundermane just so we can start turning this online. Right, getting access to 2 mana, we get to look at the top card with Thundermane. So we come into our next turn, we see Nylea off the top. Now, Nylea wouldn't come in as a creature, unfortunately, right, because of its devotion. It wouldn't be a bad cast. If I go into Surrak, I'm basically doing nothing else, right? Because I have 6 mana. We could set up something like O'Hare Chasm for next turn, I'm thinking. Again, I like Nylea. If I do this, that's 4. And I can't get, Chasm down for any cheaper. So I kind of like the idea of Chasm here. Thundermane can attack if we wanted to get into our opponents. And then now here on turn 5, we see Arithmeses. Now, Arithmeses isn't a bad option to get off the top. Although it won't come in as a creature, it'll come in as a land that could add us more mana. It's still not a bad idea. That'd be 4. It comes in tapped. We just can't use it the turn it comes in. But we still have 3 mana. Whereas if I do Nylea, then I'd have the 3 mana for Arithmeses. That's my thought. Nylea won't come in as a creature, but as soon as Arithmeses come down, it will come in as a creature. This comes in with 5 slumber counters on it. Every time we cast a spell, 1 comes off of it. And then whenever it learns out the slumber tokens, it becomes a creature. And then I would just attack with Chasm. I mean, let's hope we get the full 6 in with trample, but let's even just say we have 4, right? We get to put a creature and or land from among them, which unfortunately we whiff, which is possible, right? But probably uncommon. And now as we come into our next turn, again, we get to look at the top card of our library with Thundermane. Surrak could be a good option here. We could Teamer Ascendancy to remove a counter here. And then Surrak, so that Surrak has haste, right? Draws us a card off of Teamer Ascendancy. We see Kadama's reach on top. Actually, would have been one less, right? Because of Nylea. And then same thing, get to attacking. Hopefully Chasm can get us a few deep, and I think pretty much immediately we're going to choose. We put on the battlefield, not cast. We don't want to just choose Maelstrom Wanderer, although it's a really great one. I'm kind of thinking of the Coma. Just start taking over right that board state that draws us a card, and we see another creature at top. And then, obviously, we just untap, play Zopadrel, which is going to come in with haste. It's only costing us, because we could tap Arthurseas for the mana rights. That's 2. 6 mana total, right? Because of Nyleas, we've got 3, 4, 5 left mana. We see Koga and Yudaro off top, which we could play with Thundermane, giving it haste. It could come in and get the trample, or it could come in and fight something if we want, and then just take another big attack. They get doubled, and we're just in great spots there. Let's get into playtest number 3, keeping a 3-laner with rapid growth, an offer you can't refuse. There's the Silverback Elder and Goreclaw. So Goreclaw into the Silverback isn't bad, right, since it reduces. Play the Forest. I think we just go for the Rampant Growth. I've got a red-blue source there. I kind of like the idea of just getting maybe like a red source here. We've already got the triple green for Silverback. So I think I would go Goreclaw here, start getting that reduction. Remember, it also does reduce Surrak as well. Cactus Sure Shot is a card I figured I'd try out here. It's kind of an odd card. It's an uncommon, but if being incumbent on your turn, other creatures power 4 greater get trample and haste on turn. So basically just hands out haste to all your other creatures. But I'm thinking Elder and then we're just one green source off of doing Sure Shot here as well. But that's fine. We can leave up the offer you can't refuse. Or even a green off of playing the Trailblazer as well. So not a bad turn though, right? Really setting up for this next turn. We've got 6 mana at our disposal. Everything's docked by 2. Sure Shot, we could either, get somebody down or go digging for a land if we want to. I don't think it really matters either way. I guess the lands could make sense if we're worried about it, but I'd rather just start destroying. And then Surrak coming in, right? Another trigger there. It'll get haste because of Sure Shot. Everything here will be able to attack, get the little buff because of Goreclaw, and get a really nice, right, attack in there. And then here, my thought is, so when Trailblazer comes in, it gives us a mana. Trailblaze, since it'll have haste, right, and then a Tali. Again, 2 more casts. We could go for the lands if we want, just to dig. There's a lot of options there, destroy things. And then now all these have haste. Tali would have drawn us a card, and off of the Trailblazer. And then now you just attack in, same thing, trample buffs. This is where Goreclaw is a nice, great piece for your Stompy decks. Getting it down, getting that reduction, and just handing out its power increase as you attack. But we'll go for one final playtest here, keep it a 3-laner with that Teamer, Battlecry, the Big Atali, Kaslam, and Rhythm of the Wild. So not a bad start. Remember that Battlecryer can reduce stuff, especially for its own being power 4 greater. So right, there are some options there. Turn 3, I kind of like the idea of the Battlecryer, just to potentially reduce everything by a little bit more. And then here, I could get a Rhythmacies in this turn if I wanted to, really buff me up for next turn. Or we could just get Surrak and Goreclaw and get a 2 reduction for next turn, which doesn't seem like a terrible idea. Now, we could flash that in somebody's turn. It's not like we have to do it on our turn. And we're going to scry 1 off the path. I like Garruk's Uprising. It does present some options for draw, so I don't mind that. We come back to turn 5. Remember, everything's being reduced by 2. So these things are going to be cheap 1 mana drops. This is going to be 2 mana, but remember, it won't come in as a creature. So if I play Garruk's Uprising before it, right, it won't do me any good. But Rhythmacies will be great on the next turn, right, adding us mana. Kind of thinking Uprising plus Elemental Bond plus Rhythmacies in tapped. Yeah, it kind of stinks that it comes in tapped and we can't use the mana right away, but I think this is a nice setup turn because Uprising draws us a card when it comes in. And then now on future turns, as creatures come in, we're drawing a bunch, right? And then all we need is a nice way to give haste, which we have in Rhythm of the Wild, right? So that removes a counter here. I got 3, 4, 5, 6 mana. Most of it in green and blue, and everything's reduced by 1, 2. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mana. And we would be just in range of the Craterhoof, but Craterhoof's kind of awkward here because we're not going to get as much out of it. So we can bring the Kaslam in with haste. That's going to remove a counter here. Draws 2. And we just don't have that red source for Eshki. Otherwise, Eshki would be a great drop down here. We just have blue mana left over. Unfortunately, blue and green mana left over, so we can't just play that one quite yet. But again, Chasm could get an attack. Let's say it hits for 5, right? We get to put a creature and land from among these down. We'll get the Wolf Run. We'll get Surrak and Goreclaw, which can also start giving creatures haste and a counter when they come in. And I mean, and now I think we're just in really great shape. It draws us 2 when it comes in. Now all of our spells are being reduced by 4, right? And now you just have a chance to take a really big turn here. Sorry, we can give Surrak the counter when it comes in because it can't attack, right? So can't attack that turn, so there's no reason not to. Now we get another red source down. Everything's getting reduced again by 4, so Atali's only 3 mana. I think we start with Atali. Draw. We exile a Rampant Growth. We see what everybody else has. We can go ahead and growth. And then now we're being reduced by 5. So maybe now it's just time for the Great Crater Hoof. Before we Crater Hoof, it actually might make more sense. So that was just red, and 1. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 mana left. I was going to say, is there any way for us to get Aerithrices into a creature? We'll give it haste here. But Tali draws. I was just trying to think if there's any good way for us to. Sorry, no, that was the draw from Crater Hoof. I was trying to think if there's any way for us to get Aerithrices into a creature, but I don't think there is, and I still think the Crater Hoof is worth it. It has haste, right? So give it that counter. And then, just swing for the fences. Both Atali and it will get an extra counter from Surrak and Goreclaw. So they'll both get haste from Surrak and Goreclaw, so we can actually end up with 2 counters on both of them, and then just take our huge big alpha strike for the turn. But let me know, what do you think of Surrak Dragonclaw? Again, I think it's going to be really interesting to see this style of deck with Surrak versus Eshki. Both of them do a very interesting job, right? Eshki dealing out that damage, Surrak giving the trample. There's a lot of different ways to look at this. I'd love to know which ones you guys are targeting, and I will catch you all in the next one.